Welcome everyone to our LinkedIn Live session today. We'll be talking about how we make power consumption in data centers far more low carbon. We'll do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion. Feel free to use the chat function, which you can see, to post your questions at any time. And if you want to direct a question to a specific member of our panel, then please do so. I'll try to call out those questions as often as possible. I'm moderating the discussion today. I'm the SDIA's head of research, and I'm joined today by quite a fantastic panel of 6 industry professionals, each of whom has their own unique perspective. So I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Lars from Eco Data Center.
Thank you, Mo. I'm Lars Edin, one of the co-founders of Eco Data Center based in Sweden. Eco Data Center wants to drive the transparency for the industry reporting carbon emissions, but also participate in developing the circular economy attached to our services.
Brilliant, thank you, Lars. And Armin from Rolls-Royce.
Yeah, hi, my name is Armin Fuller. Thank you, Mo, for introduction. I'm responsible for hydrogen solutions within Rolls-Royce Power Systems, and we're having there a great focus to bringing hydrogen solutions into data center in order to greenify the electrical backup systems and grid services.
Brilliant, thank you. And Fita from Wincores.
Thank you very much, Mo. Yeah, my name is Fide Duberki from Paderborn. We have deployed the Wincores concept. We put IT, or we connect IT to wind energy farms and in wind energy farms. Sustainability was always like a social duty or challenge, and with a kind of luxury, which had a higher price tag. But basically, that totally changed since energy prices raised tremendously. And nowadays, green power supply is one, or perhaps even this solution of a profitable business.
Brilliant, thank you, Fita. And Nick from Legrand.
Hi, yeah, Nick van der Pas from Legrand, working in the Netherlands at Minkels, and quite active within standardization and in the past EU Code of Conduct and different things to, let's say, green data centers and all kind of initiatives to help that, support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And Rob Elder from Bulk.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, so Rob Elder, I'm VP of Sales and Marketing at Bulk Data Centers. Bulk Infrastructure itself is a Norwegian headquartered company covering industrial logistics, real estate, fiber networks, and data centers. Interested to join the panel today. I mean, we believe that data centers obviously can play a key part in helping organizations lower their carbon footprint. And our mission really is about helping organizations move workloads to locations like the Nordics, in particular Norway, where obviously there's significant cost carbon benefits, but also a surplus. So yeah, pleased to join today.
Brilliant, thank you. And Andreas from Vattenfall, please introduce yourself before we get into our discussion.
Sure, thank you, Mohan. Andreas has been working as key account manager at Vattenfall. Has started working with data center through the establishment of Facebook back in 2013 as an energy supplier, but also selling renewable energy, fossil-free energy. Also active in all other businesses like mining, hydrogen, chemical companies, pulp and paper, and so on. And in the data center business, we work with all kinds of data centers. And I'm also involved in our 24/7 solution that is now implemented with Conapto and Microsoft for their new data centers that was opened up today in Sweden, and have a mostly focus on the Nordics.
Brilliant, thank you. So that's our fantastic 6 panelists today. As you can see, all sorts of perspectives, brilliant perspectives that they bring to the question of how do we make data centers greener? How do we green the energy that goes into the data center? I want to start by asking, well, what do data centers currently do? And maybe it's a good time, actually, I'll start with you, Andreas. You brought up the topic of the new Microsoft data center in Sweden that went online today. What did the big cloud guys do?
Of course, they have been the forerunners in a lot of senses, all due to, of course, they have enormous resources at their availability. But so they can, of course, choose location, they can choose the best technology, they have the ability to buy PPAs, working with 24/7, so they can audit their energy consumption, so that they know they are fully renewable at all times, or working towards that. Or if they can't be, they can help put a view on those markets where they have data centers and it's not possible today to get a fully renewable supply, and then help to push out the fossil energy production so that we can become fossil free. So, but
And
still,
so
there's
so that's what some of the big guys are doing. What you're saying is they have scale, they have choice, they have first pick, and they have the financial strength to sign a lot of these PPAs. I wonder, Fita, if I can bring you in here, can smaller data centers do the same thing? What do smaller data centers do? What tools do they have to green their energy? I think you're muted.
Sorry. As I said in the beginning in the introduction, sustainability was like a social duty for a long time, and with a kind of a luxury. So like organic food or vegetable, which was more expensive in the food store. But nowadays we see that if you pronounce, or if you depend on fossil fuels as electricity or as energy consumption, you see like carbon costs are rising. You are volatile in the cost. If you see a stock exchange market, the electricity market, which the prices tremendously raise. So you better be up now to have like a good average price in the near future. And the thing is, with small data centers, you can actually go to renewable energies directly on premise. So you have the ability to I would say to merge IT facilities within photovoltaic or wind energy or even hydro energy. So you want to see that your energy costs are in the long run at an even level somehow, and that is a possibility you have like with small data centers.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying total cost of ownership is actually pretty comparable when you're looking long term. So that actually, if smaller providers, smaller co-location providers, and so on, if they were to look sort of beyond the horizon, they might actually, these things might come in evens. Is that something that you're seeing as well, Rob?
Yeah, possibly. I think just going back to your previous question, though, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that, yes, the hyperscalers build their own data centers. They're not just in locations where there's green energy. That's the first thing. Secondly, there are some very big data center operators in markets where they aren't able to secure direct connection to green energy. And a large proportion of that consumption is also through hyperscalers. So I think I think there is, it's not quite such a simple cut thing. We go hyperscalers to small operators. I think there is very much a huge capacity of data center requirements in locations where power consumption is just not green. So I think it's very problematic and difficult for whether you're a small data center operator or a large data center operator to do much about that in the current climate. The other challenge is there isn't a lot of land. So you look at on-site power generation or alternative sort of options. It's difficult. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's a simple. Obviously, the PPA part's completely valid. I think consumers have a harder job to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think our view would be, where possible, to find opportunities to directly connect to existing renewable energy sources where there is a surplus and where you're not taking that from other industries that exist in those markets. That seems to be quite a big problem certainly in certain European countries.
And I wonder, Lars, if I can bring you in here, what are some of the things you've deployed at Eco Data Center?
Well, even though that we are small for the today, a small data center operator, we are still ahead of some of the hyperscalers in terms of considering ecosystem from the very beginning, meaning that we're not only located where it's close to the source of the power production, thereby also minimizing the distribution losses, but also in the way that we're able to reuse the heat. But coming back to the power as such, first of all, we feel that a lot of people, colleagues of mine in this industry, claiming to be climate neutral because they are purely purchasing renewable power. I think that Vattenfall has done a great job in Sweden providing life cycle assessments of their production sources, and there is no such things as carbon neutral power, renewable power supply. There is no such things, and that is one of the first thing that this industry needs to acknowledge. There is no such thing. So in order to become climate neutral, you need to capture, utilize, or store the carbon somehow. That's the only way to do it. So I think that we have a lot of things to establish in this market. We are trying to drive that. First of all, we are not climate neutral, but we are purely buying renewable power. And also being close to the source of production power means that we have no distribution losses. Bear in mind that distribution losses in Sweden, with a lot of renewable power, it's one of the biggest consumer of power, and someone needs to take that bill. Not only adding the PUE, but also considering the distribution losses.
So you're saying that consider the energy as a system and the data center as a node on the system, and when you look at it like that, you incorporate the losses, the transmission losses, location, etc., etc.
Indeed. Well, someone needs to take that bill. The society, the global society takes that bill, and you need to break it down for the consumer. And if you buy this or you are located far away from the source, then someone needs to take that bill.
Excellent, brilliant. We've just received our first question from the audience. Which is great. So please feel free to use the chat, send your questions in, and if you have a specific panelist that you want to direct the question, then also please direct it. I think Andreas, you might be best placed to answer this question. What are your thoughts on RECs, REGOs?
Sorry, RECs and GOs. I see it as a way, if you want to audit something and tell what you're doing, that's more or less the only system we have. Even if you have a data center in the northern part of Sweden, and we know that is a surplus area with only hydropower and wind, it is 87-60 hours per year. Just being there doesn't give you a certificate saying that you're 100% renewable. So if you still want to prove that, you need to buy the certificate. So it's a little bit, of course, it's a little bit two ways. You're in the greenest place, but if you want to do the auditing properly, you still have to do it. And that's the same with 24/7 higher granularity on the GOs or the RECs. That means that you would be able to show every hour or 15 minutes that it's going to become maybe. And so I see it's both in promoting as a proof and something to build on for the future, I think.
Brilliant, thank you. So what you're saying there is an incentive for people who are purchasing PPAs and whatnot to purchase these. In addition to that, it's a trustworthiness proposition. Is that right? It brings trust and transparency.
Yeah, the next step then, of course, is it's buying PPAs with additionality, so you can start to push out fossil produced energy from the market and show that you are doing something more. But without the GEO as a base, you will not be able to prove it.
Excellent. And what about just the second part of that question, which was, is there an opportunity for networks of smaller data centers to collect or to aggregate, to enter into shared PPAs? If I understand the question correctly.
That will definitely come. So far, PPAs has been a very big process, but I definitely think that will come, and also that we will see a lot of more, at least around the Nordic Sea and so on, with the offshore wind coming online. That means that these are so big, so there's no players that could buy the full PPA by themselves. So that means that we will have to find solutions so we can sell PPAs in much smaller batches, more customized towards the end users. So there will come possibilities.
Brilliant. I want to bring Nick in now. So Nick, do you, from your perspective, from Legrand's perspective, is there a difference in the type of energy that comes in, whether it comes from a renewable source or not, from the perspective of the data center facility? And you're also on mute as well.
Sorry. Well, if the quality is the same, no, it doesn't. The electricity is exactly the same. So there's no difference in that part. But to come back on one step before, I think is how much energy comes in. That makes quite a difference. And although it seems like PoE is something we already all know, and it is everybody's very familiar with it, we still see that a lot of data centers are really struggling in lowering the PoE. And they're simply lowering the amount of energy they're using. And there are a lot of things to do. And what we see now recently with changing the energy prices of the last couple of months, we see a lot of extra interest in, okay, how much energy am I using, and what is the easy way to lower that, and how can I do that? And so that is important. And also what we see is, and that is, we see, and everybody knows how much energy is coming in, but where is it going to? A lot of data centers and a lot of data centers, they are struggling actually in understanding where are things going to and how to manage it. And quite often, and we understand it's availability, which is the key issue for those data centers, and they want to be up all the time, but they don't have meters in place, things like that. So there is also a lot of things to do in just to see where the energy is going and how to manage it.
Excellent. And I want to bring in Armin. Armin hasn't had a word yet. Nick mentioned one thing there which may be very applicable to the sorts of solutions that you're producing. Nick mentioned power quality.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see from your perspective at Rolls-Royce with your hydrogen solutions?
I mean, well, with hydrogen solutions, in the end, it depends on what kind of solution you will deploy. But in terms of power quality, we can fulfill the needs of power quality, what the data centers are known of today. So there will be no major difference in terms of power quality or in resilience or anything else like that. So that are the minimum requirements we have to match with new technologies anyhow.
Excellent, thank you. Question from Jonathan Evans, excuse me. With the very resilient grid Vattenfall has in Sweden, will it be possible one day to mitigate the need for standby generators? So there is a drama around, or a small controversy around standby generators and the amount that they're used or rarely used, but they're often used and tested when they're used, and they're actually rarely used in a data center, but they're tested a lot, and they're typically diesel generators. So I wonder if, I'll give this back to Armin and then back to Nick to see what their views are on this.
I would say no. It will be not possible because you will have statistically always some outages. And I personally believe, and we discussed that in our groups as well, that the installed backup in general can, if it's green, can play a big role for the grid itself in order to stabilize it when we bring more renewables into the grid itself. Obviously, with diesels and fossil-based backup generators, that's maybe not a great idea to stabilize a green grid with fossil backup. But if the backup is greenified by green hydrogen or others, then this is a major impact to bringing even more green energy into the grid. I think now the data centers are open to do grid services as a solution and offering to the society, and I think that is important for the data centers itself.
And over to you, Nick, for your response as well.
Well, I look at a little bit from a standardization perspective, and then I look at the EN5600, where we have a specific part on different categories of data centers. And if we have the highest level of availability, then yes, it is even possible to create them without generators. But then you need to have let's say 2 independent grids. And if that is possible, and there are some places, and I've been at some places in Sweden where it is possible, and yeah, then it is feasible to have a zero generator data center, even a class 4 data center. It is possible, but you have to do quite some things to realize that. And on the other hand, it depends on the kind of workload you got. There are data centers which maybe don't need an availability of several lines, and then it can be done in a different way, and you don't need generators. So it makes quite a difference how you set up your data center, what kind of workloads in your data center. So technically it can be done. Practically, it's not that easy.
Excellent. And I want to bring in Rob and Lars as well. So Rob, first on your response to this.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, I think exactly to the point, really. Customers have a different view sometimes on availability, but it tends to be the case that you don't get to compromise on high availability or high levels of security. So it is fundamentally a challenge. There are locations. Our campus in Norway, for example, is next to a 3.6 gigawatt substation, which is fed by 12 independent grid supplies connected to over 100 hydro turbines, and we have dual connections into that 420 kV substation. So we're undertaking the reliability assessment to try to prove to customers what level of reliability you can obtain by having 2 completely independent feeds. But I think it requires you to locate that compute next to that resilient infrastructure. You remove the chance for issues and as well as losses, as Lars mentioned, but also issues that you do tend to get with more distributed grid infrastructure. So, maybe those solutions are to look at places where that resilience exists already within the grid, because I think it's about working with the operator and the end customer to find a sensible solution for reliability, as opposed to just building in multiple levels of redundancy.
And over to you, Lars.
Well, I think it's a very interesting question brought up here by Jonathan, and of course it would be great the day when we can drop the need for generators. It still counts for 2.2 grams emissions per kilowatt hour to our customers that we're charging them. So if we can avoid diesel, since we are also applying 2N, we will have double of everything. So it's really an area in where we are following the development and looking at hydrogen or any other alternative solutions. As Rob is also mentioning, there are alternatives, but that is the kind of alternatives to a certain way that you need to have when you choose your location from the very beginning. But also this is very much customer driven. As we are providing bespoke solutions, I think you need to convince the market first that you would find other alternatives. Currently, we feel that diesel generators are the market requirement for the time being. It will take some time before the new technology is accepted by the market. So So, but I'm looking forward to it. I do.
Brilliant. So 4 very interesting, slightly different answers there. Armin talking about actually we probably won't move away from a system of standby generators due to availability requirements. Nick talking about actually if you could separate certain workloads from each other, then certain workloads don't require the availability needs. Rob on a similar thread talking about that. Also from a customer's perspective, sometimes customers don't need, or generally speaking, customers procure and availability is almost binary. You have it or you don't, as opposed to it being a graduated scale. And then Lars, rounding off the answer there at the end. I wonder, just to throw a question back at the audience, would data centers ever become the standby generator for the grid? And that's a question that goes into the sort of energy, electricity services argument, which I know that there's a lot of interest in, but there's very few pilots. So moving on, moving into back to what Lars spoke about earlier about the electricity system as a whole. We talked about guaranteeing or lowering the carbon intensity of the energy in. Well, what about the energy out of the data center? This is what Nick and Lars were talking about earlier. What can data centers do to reuse that energy? And does that, interestingly, is there an appropriate metric to capture that? I'll start with Nick.
Well, there are some metrics, but there are simple metrics just in measuring kilowatt hours and understand what's going where, and that's always also quite a tricky part because everybody wants to be quite vocal on how what their POE is, at least if it is quite good, but how many kilowatt hours they are using, that is a little bit more complicated sometimes. So. But at least for a data center itself, it is very important, like I stated before, to know exactly what is going where and then optimize the different streams.
And Lars, bring you back in.
Well, I truly believe this is a very important area for our industry to find new ways in recapturing the heat. Up until a couple of years ago, almost no one was doing it. Right now, all our colleagues in Stockholm are more or less connected to the district heating system, which is a very good way in recapturing the heat. But Stockholm is also one of the largest district heating systems in the world, so it's easy for those that are located in Stockholm. I think that we will in the future see very brilliant ideas of how you can actually reuse the heat. One unique way that we are doing right now in our site in Falun is to produce pellets. Pellets is sawdust, pressure, and heat. And those pellets can later on be sold to homes and industries that are not connected to the district heating system, meaning that you can also reach those that are not within the big cities, because the district heating system is normally within larger municipalities. But we have seen colleagues in Norway feeding lobster farms, etc. We will see breweries, laundries, greenhouses. But the heat must or should be recaptured somehow, because it's an asset, or otherwise it will cause urban heated islands, and which is not good neither. So we need to do that and find some metrics, proper metrics, transparent metrics, industrial standards for how to measure it.
Now, I want to bring Fita in here. I want to see, in sort of real world, what are the challenges that people face when they try to capture this heat? And then I want to bring in Rob to understand whether these challenges can be resolved earlier in the design phase.
Yeah, I totally agree. The heat recovery is necessary. The problem is, of course, the temperature level. Of course, low temperature is, you can only deploy it within perhaps agriculture goods such as fish farms and shrimp farms and so on, and asparagus and so on. But of course, no heat recovery as well, maybe for houses, but of course the location of the data center has to be within the city limits and so on. So there are some major problems we are facing with our concept. Of course, since we are in the windmill, in the wind energy plant, we have no real concept for that except for agriculture purposes. So that's of course a big challenge. But yes, heat recovery is a must for the future IT consumption and data centers.
And Rob?
Yeah, I think both the chaps make a good point. District heating, absolutely. If you have the base load, why would you not? The challenge is as data centers grow, how sustainable is it to build these near highly populated areas where there is inherently a lack of available capacity and infrastructure. So I think that's part of it. I think actually finding alternative uses and building a circular industrial process or economy around data centers is the long-term solution. And I think, as Lars mentioned, you can use the heat for, in this case, wood pellets. But if you build that, I don't know, sawmill next to the bioplastics plant that then is next to a beverage production plant, combining an aqua farm and a greenhouse, you can actually use not just our waste heat, but also the byproducts of those associated industries to create a really circular economy and a circular cluster. And I think that takes a real vision, and it takes a lot of collaboration. But I think that's the long-term sustainable option certainly for these mega out-of-town facilities. And again, being a real estate developer, that's something we're focusing on because our customers on the real estate side want logistics and industrial buildings, and we in the data center side have a lot of heat. So I think that can work quite well. The other thing I would just add is that there is obviously an increased drive to machine learning, AI, HPC, and it makes absolute sense to combine high density water-cooled compute, which requires much warmer water temperatures and inherently gets much warmer water off temperatures with these types of processes. So I think that longer-term vision is very real. It's just going to take quite a bit of collaboration and working with multiple parties.
Brilliant, thank you, Rob. I just want to pause now. We're about halfway through our session, and I want to plug our next event, which is our SDIA workshop on the 1st of December in Stockholm. So I'm trying to post it in the chat, but it's not working, technical difficulties. I'll find a way to post that later. But we will be hosting a workshop, actually, far more a more technical problem-solving workshop, and it's sort of attached to the Data Center Forum event in Stockholm. So we'll be hosting that on the 1st of December, 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. in the Clarion Sign Hotel in Stockholm. If you're interested and if you're in town for the conference and you don't have anything to do or you haven't made dinner plans, feel free, drop by, join our problem-solving workshop, and we will together brainstorm solutions to making data centers greener without compromising on availability or the business side of that data center. So now on to our next topic. We've talked about what data centers currently do. What's next? So what are the tools and interestingly, what are the technologies that are coming in that data centers should be looking at? So Armin, I want to start with yourself.
Yeah, obviously in hydrogen. So yeah, you're asking what kind of technologies are available. So fuel cells, so the PEM fuel cell is on the brink of scalability, and the prices are dropping year by year, and that is what we are promoting and are in discussions with several data centers, bigger data centers, in order to bring hydrogen-powered technology into the data center. Even if it's not only fuel cell, it's hydrogen engine, where you also can do something with the heat production as well. Obviously, storage is kind of an issue right now, or a challenge, but also for that, the ideas and solutions are coming into play now. And as my colleagues discussed with the heat and what should data centers do for the community and then for so-called circular ecosystem, I would say with greener backup, you can do a lot of good things for the grid in terms of grid services, and with that, as long as it's green, yeah, it does need to be green, and then you can think about virtual power plants and so on, that several data centers are clustering up and stuff like that. So with the technologies at hand, that can be done. Obviously, price-wise, at the moment, it's not comparable to fossil solutions at the moment. That needs to be funded at the moment, but that will change.
Brilliant, thank you. I saw Andreas nodding his head.
More
Andreas.
on mute.
No, but I can just agree. When we have enough availability of green hydrogen, that's definitely a solution that could be used if you have grid constraints or grid problems and other opportunities. But also when we are selling a lot of flexibility from data centers, mostly the frequent containment reserves to stabilize the frequency of the grid. And so far, we are mostly regulating the servers, but not all data centers with their workload can do that. So we see other opportunities to regulating fans, working with the heat in the data centers, and also if you have fuel cells, for example, you can use them or a UPS battery, so on, and regulate with those instead of disturbing the data center itself. And then I think we should be able to bring much more flexibilities to the market, and that would help to bring more intermittent renewable power to the market.
So in particular, the most promising market you've seen already is FCR, frequency containment reserve. Did I say it correctly?
Yes, but that's because it has such a little impact on the energy consumption and the availability. We say that the customer, particularly in Sweden, that they are maybe getting adjusted from the TSO approximately 100 minutes a year.
So it's relatively small risk, low risk.
Yeah, it will happen, but it's if you calculate the downtime in percentages, it's getting quite small. And the incomes are pretty good, since these reserves are needed. With the demand from the TSOs to get these reserves is high, and it's all due to that we're getting more solar and wind power into the system, and then we can phase out fossil fuels and improve the carbon emissions in the system. So it's like a win-win situation.
So what's interesting there, Andreas, is that that's happening in Sweden, which does not have a particularly large penetration of renewables. So am I right in thinking that the more renewables there are, the more need for FCR, FFR, and all these other ancillary services? Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, the need is constantly increasing, I would say. If you look at the TSOs, I mostly follow Sweden, but I know the other Nordic TSOs also, they have much higher demand on how much resources they need to purchase for the coming years. So this will continue increasing, but of course the competition will also be harder on selling the resources. So the income per megawatt hour would probably decrease over time.
Sure. Armin, I'd like to bring you in here.
Yeah, and I would say it's highly depending on in which country the data centers are. I mean, we see the regular market, the regulatory market in the UK, for example. It's even if they're not the greenest grid in the world, but they have a lot of FCRs going on, and grid services and stabilization is needed, and that will it's an outlook of what maybe Central Europe will face in the future, when the renewable impact is getting higher and higher, and then having all the power already installed and green, that could make the difference in the end in order to go even higher the green technologies and energy production.
Interesting. So now we're talking about different markets with different grids, I should say, with different needs. Fita, you wanted to come in here?
Yes, I mean, if you're talking about future challenges and opportunities, of course, and it has been said that the market, the more renewables are in the market, the more flexibility and volatility we face. And if you look at demands for data centers right now, we have a very leveled out energy demand. So if the data center could also, and this is something I think Andreas already said, that data centers can flexible their demand as power to X or power to X, and when deployment and could bring in their new possibilities, that would be very interesting. Like HPC calculations and so on can be done when there's like a lot of wind or such things. So we can really be flexible to the energy price and energy demand.
Would it be fair to say that flexibilizing our workloads or a data center's computational workloads, that would require the customer to be on board in most cases, and the customers currently aren't really aware that that's something that they can do. So actually, one of the challenges or the blockers to flexibilizing this is actually customer awareness, in particular corporate IT load awareness. Is that a fair? Nick, you look like you're.
I think there is. This is not core business for a lot of data centers, and for a lot of there are some people within data centers who understand what's happening here and what's happening on the energy markets and the demand and the flexibility which is asked now. But there are a lot of them who have no idea, and they just stick with, okay, I want to have my data center available and secure and not use too much energy, but not aware that they can be part of this and becoming a greener grid. And I think that would really help just to educate and what's happening here. And there are quite some differences what we just heard in which part of Europe, and some markets are far more developed and already understand what's happening, and it is quite different in different countries. So I think there is a task to have everybody at the same level understanding what are the possibilities here.
Brilliant, thank you. I just want to pause. We're approaching the end of our session, so we have about 10 minutes left, maybe a bit less. And I want to now bring it back. We went out to the grid level, and I want to bring it back to the data center. So given the grid location that you're in, what can data centers start to do? And I want to actually start now for the next 10 minutes to talk about on-site generation. Armin mentioned on-site generation from hydrogen. I wonder, Fita or Lars, have you come across other forms of on-site generation or on-site storage?
Well, currently we are not looking into that, to be honest, and I don't expect us to be the first adopting a new technology in that sense. Once again, it's very market driven. It is, but of course we are following all the innovations very detailed. But for the time being, we have no such plans. We have a very reliable, touch wood, power supply we of course feed it from two different directions. So for the time being, it's not the top priority for us. Not saying that we're not following it, of course.
And Fita?
Well, of course, we're using wind energy directly, being within the windmill, but we don't sell the overload or something. So that's the operation side of the wind energy plant. So as a data center operator, we just demand energy directly. So I cannot really say that we offer energy to the market or something. That would be not true.
So and correct me if I'm wrong. So currently, all of the energy you produce on site in the wind turbine, you consume?
Well, no, we have we demand like 90% of the time in the data center is directly from the turbine, and of course 10% there's no wind, and we have to buy it over the grid. That's true. But of course, comparing like 3 megawatt wind energy plant to our 300 kilowatt data center, of course, there's a big mismatch. And of course, the major supply is, or the major production is, of course, sold to the grid. Yes.
Brilliant. And I want to bring Rob in here now. I wonder if, in the real estate industry, is there more interest in on-site generation or the potential to build on-site generation retrospectively? Is that something? Are those sorts of conversations happening?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very location, someone else pointed out, dependent. I mean, in Norway, you have probably the lowest cost of energy in Europe. I think currently it's 24 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour or something, which is actually 10 times less than Denmark. So perhaps one strategy you might take in Norway, you might do differently in Denmark. But data centers are similar to logistics buildings. They have a large facade. So I think simply adding solar panels and things makes a lot of sense. It needs to often stack up financially. And with such a low cost of energy, that return on investment is sometimes a challenge. But yeah, I think absolutely. As an organization, you have a responsibility to a wider society rather than just purely doing things that either tick a box or make green sense. You also have to consider society. So why would you not do a lot of these things? I think is the starting position. But we're looking at things. Yes, hydrogen. We're looking at replacing diesel with HVO, hydro generated vegetable oil. We're open to exploring a lot of different solutions. But as I say, sometimes it's not a one size fits all. Where you already have quite reliable, low cost, 100% green energy, maybe you take a different view to somebody who's in a different location.
Excellent. And Fita, you have a comment?
Rob, you have to excuse me, but there's one thing I have to say. Of course, physically, you're totally right. Norway is like very on sustainable level, but you sell like 90% of your electricity as certificates to Germany. So basically, driving with our dirty fossil coal mining electricity. So that's a big thing. Think about that. The Norwegians will really drive on our fossil fuels. In Germany, you sell all those certificates to us. So that's something keep in mind.
I think we started at that point, which to the uninitiated who don't, this whole purchasing of those certificates, the fact that we're connected directly to a grid substation that's fed by 100 turbines, I've still got to buy green certificates like the person in Germany to prove it. I mean, so yeah, I agree. It's a
big shame. It's something I hope we're gonna come over that, but it's just the way it is right now.
If you're behind the meter, you don't get any DOs actually, because then you don't need them. So the system actually has a hole in it that grants you. So if you're behind the meter, you can say that you're totally green. You're not allowed to produce the guarantees of origin then.
Interesting. Lars, can I bring you?
Well, I like that comment. I think the last time I saw it was that German company was buying almost 50 terawatt hours in green certificates from Norway. It must be a great business model for Norway, selling anything that can't really be distributed later on. But I think that this has come to a situation now from German companies that they realize that it's really greenwashing or green hushing. Doing this. So I think that those golden days for green certificates, I hope, is soon over.
Yeah, we would certainly much rather host those consumers of data center capacity in Norway or other Nordic countries rather than export the power or the GOES is very much our mission.
I agree with that.
And Andreas, you're nodding your head. I wonder if you have a final comment there.
No, but saying that but it has a lot to do with the system in Germany also, all the wind in Germany is subsidized also, so that's why there hasn't been any German geos, so they have been forced to buy them elsewhere. But still, it's, if you have the ability to locate your data center where you have green electricity and a cold climate, that's the solution. Otherwise, of course, if you're in a country where you don't have that opportunity, then of course on-site generation, and you need to look at to solve the problem yourself at a much higher degree. So it's much easier, of course, being a data center in certain locations than others.
Interesting. That brings us back to Nick's point earlier and Rob's point about workload needs and availability needs. Last question from Chris. What's stopping a new type of SLA? So one that was, you could say, an availability conscious or reliability conscious SLA. I throw this back at Nick, actually. Be interesting to see your opinion.
Well, I think it would be great if that's possible, but quite a lot of, well, depends on customers. And what I would expect is that with scale computing, that's the first area where this can happen, because of it is easier to move loads and maybe related to bigger AI type of loads, things like that it's easier to shift loads. And yeah, then it's possible, but this is really a market thing. So it is not, technically it's quite feasible, but practically it isn't that easy. And the other thing is what I just said, it might also have to do with education, with understanding that this is a thing and this might be a good thing, and how to value these SLA. That makes also quite a big difference. If it is very cheap to buy availability, then it's, yeah, where are the costs? So that's also quite important how to do that, I think.
Excellent. That's a perfect place to stop the session, I think. We brought up a lot of interesting topics: on-site generation, PPAs, the differences in different grids, and then obviously there's all sorts of challenges and opportunities that come with it. Just briefly, big thank you from our panelists, and I'll go around and give every panelist one. If they ask the question, if they could change one thing or improve one thing that would make data centers greener, what would it be? Lars, I'll start with you.
Well, since we are already building our data centers in laminated wood, that can't be even further improved. I would say to find a good way in providing reserve power and including batteries. For sure, if we can find those solutions, we would very much look into that.
Excellent. Fita?
Even this is not my central business, I would directly recommend on a demand direct cooling, water cooling. So we can raise the temperature level of the waste heat. So that would be something I would totally want to see.
The higher temperature heat.
Higher temperature heat.
It's easily reused or more easily used. Yeah. Armin?
Yeah, obviously from our side, it's the backup generation as well, as Lars said. I would also combine the hydrogen with the battery in order to get most of both technologies, in order to provide something to the community in terms of grid services and so on. That would be my take.
Rob?
I've got to come up with something different. I think reuse of heat for the long-term sustainable view. So circular industries combined with data centers, I think is a must-have in the long term.
It can be the same as what someone else has already said. Nick?
Well, something quite completely different, but it is that software programmers would understand how much energy their software uses and have a more granular measuring of energy. Well, or at least go up to the server, but then do an extra step. And at this moment, I don't think at any university, or hardly any university, there's a course for programmers how to make energy efficient software. and we are not measuring it. So I think there is a really next step to do, and the first start understanding where energy is used, and then lower the energy uses.
So that's a transparency, granularity thing, but it's also understanding why we're consuming the energy in the first place.
Yeah.
It's the IT bit. Okay.
The one of the POE is we're looking with reuse, etc. Then we're using the whole all the energy, but it's also really good to understand that things can be done there, and I think that this is an area where there could be done a lot of things which are not yet done.
Brilliant. And Andreas?
I have to agree with the previous speaker. Now, I say that a new KPI on efficiency, where you both involve everything from the design, software design, heat recycling, and flexibility, so you get a much more overall view on the data center, so you can compare in a much better way and see who is really efficient.
So a real system view at the data center, or the digital value chain from the service to the data center. Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Brilliant panel, brilliant discussion today. Lots of fantastic perspectives from industry. I'd like to remind people to sign up to our event, our workshop on the 1st of December in Stockholm. It's completely free. It's dinner, it's problem solving, it's taking some of the challenges that we've identified here and trying to solve some of those challenges over a glass of wine, completely free. Please join us in Stockholm. Julia, thank you, Julia, for posting the link in the chat. So that's all from us here. Thank you, panelists, for joining us. Have a good day.
Thank you.